Okay, good. Can you hear me? Okay, good. Okay. All right. See you. I don't know. So, I'm gonna test right now. I'm running around. This is all happening on the client. So what happens is you can see my player's movement. That information is getting sent to the server, and my movement, once it hits the server sends it to other clients. So it's completely possible that you do something with scripts and it only shows up on your client. There was an issue, if you remember, uh, the Venator, the training one, the training game. There was an issue where I accidentally made it so the moving platforms only showed up on my client and no one else could see it. Only I could see it because I didn't go through filtering enabled. So a lot of the times when you're scripting, you have to work in this, you have to abide by that security feature where you have to think like, how do I get the client information to the server so everyone can see what's happening? And it's also good because sometimes you only want one client to see what's going on. Like if you have like a certain room that you only want Temple Guard to enter, for example, you don't want other players to be able to see that door open or be able to access that room. You only want the Temple Guard to do that. So sometimes it's really advantageous to only have certain events on the client. Um, and that also takes us to what local scripts and just regular scripts are. Local scripts are scripts that are only executed on this particular client, while regular scripts are executed on every single client. It's a server element. Is there any confusion on that?
Any questions?
Yes. Whatever you script in a server script will show up for everyone. Whatever you script in a local script, unless you specifically send that information on the script to the server, it'll only happen on one client. Okay, so replicated storage stores information that can be accessed by both the client and the server from like you can access it from the server, you can access it from the client as well. So if I were to have like a well, we won't use a boolean. If I were to use an integer value, so like any like you'd store a number in this, I would store like any number. So let's say 5. If I were to in a local script, for example, in a local script, if I wanted to change this value to 6 or 1, I could do that in a local script. But I could also do it in a server script. Doesn't matter because it's replicated storage. It's replicated from the server to the client. So replicated storage, you can access whatever's in here from anywhere. Doesn't matter. Server script storage is where you're going to store all of your server scripts, and server storage you're going to store whatever whatever elements you only want to be in the server at all times. So server script service and server storage are two things that can't be accessed by the client. It has to be accessed by the server. Starter GUI. GUI is graphical user interface. It's all the stuff that shows up on your screen. For example, if I were to do screen GUI and then put like a frame in here, this frame shows up on your screen. You could put like text in it. You can make it look pretty. It's your HUD basically. Starter GUI is all the UI in the game. That's where you put the UI in the game. Now, remember this. Really important you take note of this if you want to do UI at all. Notice how it says starter GUI. That's because this is the UI at the start of the game. It's when you first load in. Anytime after the player loads in, if you were to go into starter GUI and try to change the UI around, maybe you wanted to make a loading bar or a health bar or something, something that's dynamic that changes. You can't do that by accessing starter GUI. You have to go to that specific player and go to player GUI. So sometimes people will try to make these cool UIs, these interfaces, and they'd get really tripped up because everything looks right, but they're accessing starter GUI. Starter GUI is irrelevant at this point. You want to go to player GUI. So if I go to player GUI, see the new screen GUI that I made, and I can see the frame here, and I could, when I change the background color, it changes to blue. If I did it here, change this to green, nothing happens. So starter GUI, the main thing you want to take away right now is this is where all of the interfaces go. That other tip I just did will come up later if we ever spend like a lesson on UI. Starter pack and starter player are similar. Starter pack has inventory items, that's your backpack. And starter player has both player and character scripts. So these are the scripts that are loaded into the game with the player. Character is the physical player model, while player is like your specific ID you have on the actual Roblox server storage. So if I were to go into game again, I should just stay into game, honestly. Workspace, this heavy D123 model here is my character. It's the physical model in the game. Player is just me as an account. That's my player account, basically. And these scripts are synonymous with whatever user ID I have. And it's pretty cool to look at this because this is like the default Roblox scripts. This is like the chat. This controls all the chat in the game. Sounds. You can like mess around with that if you want. It's a little advanced though. Teams are the teams, so when you see like Jedi or Visitor or whatever, that's because whoever built the game put those teams under this teams folder. Sound service controls all the sounds, and the rest you really don't care about ever. So are there any questions regarding Studio? Okay, good.
Only question I'm to ask, and you may cover this later, is you were saying, for example, that if you want a dynamic UI, it has to be for the player. Are we going to cover how this works if we're applying it to all players instead of a specific player?
Yeah, so for example, like if you wanted if you had like a countdown or something, or like you're doing like a rating, like capture points and stuff, and you wanted to display that like to everyone, UI is always uh, a client side thing. But what you do is you change everyone's UI with a normal script, so a server script.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. All right, so let's get into an actual script here. So you'll see like print hello world. Print is probably the first thing you'll ever see. Uh, it just displays text in the output box here. Really, really useful for debugging because it'll tell you what's running and what's not. But we're not going to focus on functions today. What we are gonna focus is probably the most fundamental part of Lua or any like program or computer science in general, and that's called data types or variables. So if you guys have ever taken an algebra class, you know what a variable is. Does anyone not know what a variable is? I know you're not that stupid, Foxy. Okay, I believe in Mara. Foxy should know better. Okay, so a variable, think of it like a box that you put something in. So if I had a box, I could put like, I don't know, a pencil sharpener in it. You think? A lot of people hate algebra. So, not for you. Yeah, so if we have like, so x in this case is our variable. If you have x plus 2 is equal to 5, x is like our box that we have to assign a certain value to. So in this case, to make the statement true, it would be 3 plus 2 equals 5. So x would have to equal 3. But um, it's really fundamental in computer science because a lot of the time, well, actually all the time, the computer can't really the computer can't act like us in the way that we can infer stuff. The computer has to specifically know the data that it's working with and know how to manipulate it. So if we have a variable here, x is equal to 5, we assign the value 5 to x. What is 5? Can anyone tell me? Like what type of data is 5? No. Yes. Yes. Whoever said integer is right. So we know that 5 has what we call a data type. An integer is one of the data types. There are 8. We're not going to get into all of them because you don't really need to know all of them. But the basic ones that we're working with are these. That's not one. That's also not one. Integer, float, char, and boolean. Boolean sounds funny, I know. So an integer is just a regular whole number. Float is what we call decimal numbers. Think of it as like when we say float, it's actually short for floating point number. The floating point refers to the decimal point. It kind of floats between each digit. So an integer is a whole number. Floating point number is a decimal. A char is like a character. So like A, B, C, those are all characters or chars. And a boolean is a true or false value. This is called conditional logic. So we call these primitive data types because they're sort of the lowest types of data you can find. You can't break a integer into anything smaller. You can't break a char into anything smaller. One other data type that I want to address that I'll be using all the time, but they're not primitive, is the string. A string is a string of characters, a string of chars. when we had print hello world was actually a string. So when the computer sees true or false, hello world, A, or like 4.5 or 4, it automatically knows that, hey, that data is a string, that's a boolean, that's a char, and then based off of that, it knows how to handle that different data. And it also needs to know what type that data is in order to assign binary digits, or like it needs to allocate memory, a certain amount of memory, but that's a little bit more advanced. Right now, just remember the words string, boolean, char, float, and integer. So now that we know those, I'm going to comment them out. You should also know comments. A comment, you can make a comment by just doing 2 dashes. If you comment a line out, it won't execute as anything. It's sort of just a comment for developers who are looking at the script. And it's really, really useful that you use comments because all the time when you code for a long time and you have like tons of lines of code, you'll start to forget what certain sections of your code actually do. And so you need to rely on comments to sort of refresh your mind. And it also tells partners what certain code does. They don't have to like look through it and try to interpret it themselves. So using this stuff, what we're actually going to start doing is we're going to use variables to mess with some settings in the workspace right here in the Explorer. So let's mess with the base plate, for example. Now that we know data types, we'll separate this. We'll start um, like traversing through. What's up?
I was asking if we got to one of the most important parts yet, that part being done.
No, we have not.
What's up?
He's
No.
talking about the phallic object.
Oh, no. We're not going to get there for a bit, honestly.
Are you fucking kidding me?
No, that's manipulating physics.
I mean, couldn't you just do a particle emitter like gravity?
Yeah, you could do a particle emitter
I don't know, maybe we can try that actually.
if you want to do that.
Recorded, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Alright, well.
So, the first thing we're going to do actually, I won't use this. I'll do that. So here I've made a variable called workspace. So local, the word local, if you go back to what I was talking about with client and server, your variables also have different scopes. So if I were to make a let me start with this. If I were to get rid of the local here, oh shit. If I were to get rid of the local, yeah, let's give me a little comment here. So if I just made a variable called workspace, that variable is accessible from anywhere in the script. Can you be quiet? If I were to do local though, and then put it, if I do like an if statement, if true, then e. Okay. So local workspace is equal to game.workspace. What that statement's doing is it's actually grabbing the workspace from the Explorer. What I'm proving here, the keyword local means that the scope of this variable is confined to the closest, what's a good term for it? Sort of parent. I'll explain it like this. If I were to try to change workspace outside of this if statement here, it wouldn't work. Because local in this sense means that it's confined to the scope of this statement here, this if statement. Whereas if I were to do this, do local workspace equals game.workspace outside of the if statement, then local means the entire script because there's no like structure confining it. That's got to be a little confusing. So we'll cover that again as we get into different statements and stuff. It's not really important now. So local workspace equals game.workspace. What we're doing there is we're grabbing the workspace from the Explorer. And now that we're in workspace, it's sort of like traveling through folders. So if you were to look into your file explorer, if you're on PC or whatever, it shows you like your current destination in this window here. It'd be like C Dylan, whatever, sort of like that. Like, have you ever seen how to traverse files? It's sort of like a tree of different folders where you have to start at the root and go down. Follow kind of like a branch. Same thing with Studio and scripting here. So now that we're in workspace, we have to get to baseplate. We're trying to do stuff with the baseplate right now. So in order to do that, we do workspace.baseplate. The dot here means that we want to enter a child of this current element. So I'm going to be saying parent and child a lot. The workspace is the parent, the baseplate is the child. Whatever's in that specific folder is called the child, and their parent is that folder. So this value here in replicated storage is the child of replicated storage. This local script in starter GUI is the child of starter GUI, and starter GUI is the parent of the local script. So what we're doing here, we're going into the baseplate, and now if I click on baseplate and go to properties, properties has all the different properties has all the different elements of this specific baseplate. So you can see like the brick color, you can see the material if you want to change the material to like, I don't know, glass. So you change the material. Or brick. We can change the transparency. We change the name here, that'll change the name in the Explorer. See, now it says cool baseplate. We also change the parent, the orientation, the position. We can do everything here. We can even set its. We can even tell the game if we want the baseplate to be anchored, which means that it's static, or if we want it to move. If we want it to collide with other players, we could specify that too. So what we want to do is we want to change the brick color of the baseplate through the scripts. So right now it's like dark gray metallic. Cool. So we want to we have to navigate to the brick color here. All we have to do, since we're already in the base plate, is put a dot and then brick color equals, and now we're setting the color, brick color dot new. Do alder. It's just like a type of purple, or you just do blue. Let's do dark blue. So brick color dot new. This stuff, it's not something that you can really learn. Um, it's not something you can pick up just like going along the way. Like you have to look at what we call the documentation of Lua. So whatever programming language you use, there's documentation for certain parts of code that are already written for you. So brickcolor.new is one of those pre-written functions that you can use, and this defines a new brick color. Pretty self-explanatory. All you have to do is type in what type of color you want. And when you're doing that, when you're typing in these are called parameters, what's in the parentheses here, or arguments. It's something that the function accepts. It'll kind of give you like hints in this tooltip here on what you can actually pass in. So in this case, we're doing dark blue. So if we were to load this up, I have to get rid of this or comment it out.
Would you want to add a wait function so you could see it change?
That's what we'll do next. Oh.
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 Your problem is workspace is already a quick tab thing that you can do, so you should probably capitalize the W or something to differentiate it. Like in the local.
Yeah.
In the local workspace, because if you type in workspace regularly, it'll
Yes. It's actually predefined.
Yeah.
So we don't even need it. I have a brain. Oh. Oh, hold on. I have a feeling it's because it's in Starter GUI. There we go. Okay. So now we can't see it though. Let's change it to something really visible. Like really red or something like that. We'll change it. Oh, that's why it's not working. Because I changed the name. See how I had workspace.baseplate? I changed the name when I was explaining properties to cool baseplate. So now we gotta do cool baseplate. That's why I was like, what are you talking about? It still didn't work. It's probably a local script, yep. Yep. There we go. So now our base plate's red. Blood red bricks. say we wanted to wait a little bit. You have this wait function here. All that does is it suspends the script, so it stops, everything stops running for 1 second. And say you want to change it to maybe really blue or baby blue. Oh, I have to up the wait time. This should work. There you go. Yeah. So it changed from red to blue. So if we were to do this on a local script, but in the proper place, do it in here. There you go. Now watch this. Currently on the client, go to server, nothing changed. That's because we did it on a local script. So that really shows you the difference between a client and a server and how scripts are executed on either. So if I were to make a part, just leave it like that. Do you guys know how to navigate in a script to that part? Now that I've shown you with the base plate. No? Who said no? Okay. So, do you know what the first step would be? Okay. No, you're good. Okay, so the first step, make a variable. You can call it anything. Or actually, you would typically make a variable. So for some things you don't need to. Which is this thing. The game, you start at the game. Game holds all these different folders here. Think of the Explorer as sort of just the word game. You do game dot workspace. So what I've done here in the script, I start at the game and then I've gone to the workspace because all these parts here are held in the workspace. If I wanted to get to a specific part in the workspace, I have to look for its name here. It's called part. Go back into the script. I go from the workspace to part. So you see how I'm kind of navigating down the Explorer by just like typing in the names of the folders or the parts and putting a dot between them. The dot is sort of like the signal to the computer that you want to enter the next element in that folder. Yeah, it's like a step. You're just stepping to that next part. So, and I can do this for anything in the Explorer. If I didn't want to go to the workspace, I would do, if I wanted to go to lighting, I would do game.lighting, and then do whatever I wanted to do with the children of lighting. Or I could go to replicated storage. And you're going to be doing this for the entirety of your scripting. Everything that is scripting is just manipulating what's in Explorer. If I want to like code something to happen with a user interface, I'd have to go to the player GUI, or if I wanted to like update a value in some storage here, I'd have to navigate through the Explorer to that particular data and then change it with the script. Okay. So now that we know, we've learned a little bit about how to use Studio for scripting, at least. We learned the primitive data types. We've learned client and server, and I showed you how to navigate through the Explorer. It's been like 50 minutes, so I'm probably gonna wrap up soon. Is there anything you guys want me to touch on before we? So material, you do this almost the same thing. Um, so if we wanted to go back to that part that I have here, right now this is plastic. I can show you here. If you look into properties, you see the material here is plastic. All parts were started as plastic. What we do, just like we did with the base plate, what we'll do is we'll do game.workspace.part, because we're trying to change that part. That's the name of the part. And from here, with the base plate, we did brick color because that we wanted to change the color, but now we want to change the material. So you type in material. Now here's a little bit confusing part. In order to change the material, you have to use something called enum. So yeah, enum. So let me try to explain this real quick. So I want to look it up. You should use enum. So those data types that I showed you aren't the only data types. They get more complicated, and enum stands for enumeration, which is a special data type that takes in a set of values. So a material value isn't like an integer or a boolean or anything. It's kind of special, which is why it requires this enum parent here. Enums are used a lot for higher level development, but you don't need to worry about that right now. A lot of this stuff will seem confusing, but trust me, you'll pick it up if you code a lot. And most of what you do, you'll find online. Like, most of my learning was just from looking up stuff that I wanted to use in game, really. Roblox spells it out for you on their websites, on their dev forums. Uh, if you have trouble with scripts, if you don't know how to do something, trust me, like if you look it up, I guarantee something will be there that tips you off on how to do it. So get comfortable with Google searching, essentially. But yeah, this is how you would change the material. So if you want to change it to like, I don't know, fabric, we'll do this here. It was plastic before, now it should change to fabric. Yep. So there you go. Alright, is there anything else? Hmm? What?
the server, you should shouldn't use a local script.
You can use a local script, but you have to use what's called remote events or functions, which we'll get into later. A remote is basically uh, it's a it's a kind of like a case that carries information from the client to the server securely.
Like a messenger boy?
Yeah, it's a messenger essentially that you use to pass messages from the client to the server. Roblox used to not have remote events, but they made it mandatory a couple years back, and it kind of screwed up a lot of games. That's actually why, if you're old, that's why Seraphos sabers don't work anymore, because those didn't use remote events, and so everything broke on them when that Roblox update came out. But yeah, we'll get into that. Anything else? All right.
Coding is not easy.
Yeah, no, it is. It
I
is.
agree.
It is. It'll the clouds will part though eventually.
Eventually, but
Is this just a one-time thing, or is this gonna be like a reoccurring thing?
No, I'll keep doing it. I don't care if I have time.
You said it.
you're right. Like I want to be a fucking dev, or even like dev my own game still.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Same here. I just that was being funny. That's just me and my friend Sparse. What do you call him?
Yeah, I know. He's fucking smoking
Sparse,
weed.
the poster boy.